Excellent. All right, so these are the 316 notes about for loops. And a for loop we actually kind of used in the combo menu, or the registration and grades class list app or program. But here we're going to use it explicitly for like 4 or 5 different tasks. And so the first thing I want you to understand is that a for loop can iterate, which means move one item at a time, through a couple of different iterables, is what they're called. So the first iterable is a string. And so the way that you make a for loop is you say for each, and we'll talk about that each variable because we can actually make that variable different words. But the most common one is each. So for each thing in an iterable, it'll do some action for that thing. And so I think the simplest is just to print each thing, okay? And the word variable is holding the word Tallahassee. And so if I run this program, we get each letter on its own line. Because what it did is it went through the word, and for each character, it printed that character. Cool. The other version of an iterable, or the second one, I should say, because there are 3, is a list. So I have 2 lists here. If I put the numbers list and I say print each, it'll print 1 item per line, okay? And so if we have something a little bit more exciting than numbers, like characters, then we can print each character in the list 1 time, okay? And this is just a way to repeat kind of a loop for each item in the list or each letter in a word. I'm going to skip the range function. We'll come back to it, but I just want to show you that we could do something more exciting than print. Here, oh, I do have to talk about range, don't I? Yeah, I do. Okay. So the last type of iterable is called a range, and it's actually a function which makes a list of numbers really quick. So if I say print range 10, it's going to make a list that starts at 0. Come on, Python. Maybe this is the ceiling where you found it. Okay, so it starts at 0, and then it goes up 10 digits, which should end up at 9. It'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. If we give it more parameters, we can tell it where to start. So let me change this. Let's, instead of printing the whole range, we'll say for each in range 10, print each. So this prints each of those digits on its own line, kind of like the number list that I had before, but it created it for me starting at 0, going up 10 spots. If we didn't want 10 items, we could say start at 5 and go up to 10. And so if we print there, you'll see it goes 5, and it'll always stop 1 before our maximum. Okay, so if we put just the 1 number in there, it gives us 0 to that number. If we put a starting point, then it will stop 1 before that last number. Then the last parameter we can do is we can tell it to go by a certain step size. So here I said start at 5, go up to, but not including 10, and only give me every other number, or every 2 numbers. Okay, and so that's what it made. So one way that we use the range function is if we just want to repeat a process more than once, we can tell it to print something or do something 1 time for every item in the range list. And so this range list has 10 items in it, so it printed hello 10 times. So if we ever want to just repeat something in our program, we can use a for loop and the range function. Now I'll show you what I was going to show you before. This is for every number in the range from 1 to 51. So that's 1 to 50, including all numbers. It's going to look and see if the number is divisible by 2. And if it is, it's going to print double. And if it's not divisible by 2, then it's going to print the actual number. And I see some of you are so excited about this that you're like tweeting about it right now. Twitter's a thing, right? But if you please look up here and check it out while doing this. This is we're probably like halfway through the notes. So instead of just doing something like printing the item in the list or printing some other item like the word hello over and over and over again, here it's looking at each item and it's considering whether or not it meets a certain criteria. Okay, and so we're going to do that in our project today too, where we want to see if the certain thing in the list or if the certain number meets a certain criteria, and if it does do one thing and if it doesn't do another thing. So that's shown here with the for loop and then a conditional inside of that for loop looking at each item. Now that's where the word each is a variable that we are defining. That is what we're going to call the item one at a time. So like for this example, we might call each number, since it's a list of numbers, and you'll see we get the exact same output. But when we were printing Tallahassee before, we might say for letter in Tallahassee, print letter. So I want you to understand that variable in the for loop, we can call it whatever we want, and we should do so in a way that makes sense, because then when we're trying to read through our code later, we'll know kind of like what does the each variable or the letter variable or the number variable, like what is that holding on to? What thing is that looking at one at a time? For this assignment, you've got 5 different for loop programs you're going to write. So the first one, unbelievable. Oh, I got it. Okay. So the first example is you're just making a program that prints every letter of the word Mississippi without writing out print M, print I, so on. The second example that you are going to make is one that lists 4 different things and what type of variable they are. So the number 14 or 1,452 is an integer, and then so on and so forth down the list. The third one is going to print every number in a list, but instead of just replacing the even numbers with the word double, it's going to replace numbers divisible by 3 with fizz, and numbers divisible by 5 with buzz. And then if you have a number that's both, like 15, then you should replace with fizz buzz. The fourth one is you type in a positive number, and then it tells us in that number, from 1 to 43, there are 9 multiples of 5, which must include 0, and then 6 multiples of 8 between 0 and 43. So this is going through the whole number. That's why it uses a for loop. But as it goes through, it doesn't just print a line. Instead, it's taking a count and it's seeing, is this number divisible by 5? If it is, I need to add on how many numbers are divisible by 5 to report out at the end. And the last one is just printing this shape. You can do this in like, I want to say 7 lines of code. So using a for loop can help us do that. And to do this last one, I want to show you one last example, which is Here, it's using the each variable instead of actually printing the number 1 through 5 or 1 through 4. It's taking that and it's multiplying it times text, which what that does is it repeats the text. So the text that I'm multiplying with this asterisk right here is Babu. And so when each is equal to 1, it prints 1 Babu freak. But when each is equal to 2, it multiplies Babu times 2, printing 2 Babus and 1 freak. And then 3 Babus and so forth. And so this is the principle that they'll use in that last example where you're trying to print multiple symbols on the same line. And those are the notes for 316.